Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 31st of December 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your daily Steam deals. Let's have a look at what is on today, shall we? As always, these go on for 48 hours, but there is a new series of deals every 24. If you happen to miss the recommendations for yesterday, then you can still get those games on Steam, and you can watch yesterday's Salebox to get an idea of what's going on with it. Okay, let's begin, shall we? We'll have a look at F1 2012, 50% off, taking it down to $25, 20 euros or £15. It's a Formula 1 racing simulation by Codemasters, which usually means it's pretty good. Codemasters do know what they're doing when it comes to racing games. However, there have been some criticisms of this one, including the notion that the physics engine is not particularly good, also the fact that it seems to be just a roster update based on F1 2011, and actually just taken out some features, including Grand Prix, and has scaled down the career mode, which is certainly a little bit weird. However, at the end of the day, it is a Codemasters racing game, so it is still pretty good nonetheless. It's very hard for me to recommend or not recommend this, because I actually have no interest whatsoever in Formula 1, and I haven't had any experience with this game whatsoever. I'm merely going off some of the research that I did there. But the chances are, if you are a Formula 1 fan, you've probably already picked this one up or your own 2011 anyway, and there's really not a huge reason to go back and pick up 2012 if you happen to already have 2011, simply because they are very, very similar games. Deus Ex Human Revolution, 75% off, taking it down to $5, €4.74 in Tier 1, €3 in Tier 2, and £3.74. This is most likely the game that I would say is deal of the sale. The thing is, it was the deal of the sale last time as well. Deus Ex Human Revolution gets discounted a lot, and it's weird because it's very much a AAA game that came out last year and is now just disgustingly cheap. And that's cool. Go get it. My god, what, do you not own this game yet? Why? I don't really know, because this game is actually great. I mean, I could go on for hours about things that I preferred in the original Deus Ex versus Deus Ex Human Revolution, and all the changes that have been made since Deus Ex Invisible War that are clearly better in Deus Ex Human Revolution, and the stealth aspects and the way that canned melee works, and even things like the graphic style and the way that the game kind of hints in the direction you're supposed to be going. I could talk about all of that, but I think the most important thing to say about it is that it is a really, really good stealth action first-person shooter with open-world RPG elements, a great story, awesome environments, and a rather large variety of ways to dispatch people. It's also rewarding the kind of person that likes to sneak around and explore everything, which is exactly what I used to do in the original Deus Ex. There's no question that this is worth your money. Also worth picking up the expansions. The Explosive Mission Pack and Tactical Enhancement Pack are always a good bet at 75% off. With the Mission Pack, you do get an extra mission, and you get a few extra weapons. You also do get a few extra weapons with the Tactical Enhancement Pack, so that's worthwhile. The expansion, The Missing Link, you could call it an expansion over DLC. I mean, it's a pretty big piece of story content with a great boss, which is something that the main game does lack. All of the bosses were outsourced to a different company, and they ended up being freaking awful. But The Missing Link is really good. It's still 75% off discount, but they haven't knocked the price down of that actual piece of DLC since it came out, so the overall amount you're saving is not quite as good. But Human Revolution is something that I would recommend to pretty much anybody. It's an absolutely wonderful game, totally worth your time. Binding of Isaac, 75% off, taking it down to $1.24, €1.24 and 99 pence. Super cheap for a game that was actually released at a super cheap price to begin with. This is a game I never really got into, but I do know that it has a pretty massive fan base. Loads of people really love The Binding of Isaac. What it essentially is kind of like a roguelike Zelda in a very odd and twisted world with some rather disturbing themes, quite frankly. And it's got a lot of replayability simply because of the way that the game is randomly generated, and there's a lot of things that you can miss the first way through. It's a very challenging game as well. Once you die, that's it. You gotta start it all over again. And as a result, it's very appealing to a lot of people. Personally, I was completely put off by the aesthetic, but that seems to be something that is very much a personal problem as opposed to anything else. And Binding of Isaac is worthy of your time if you're looking for something very challenging, if you're looking for something with a lot of replayability, and you can get past or even immerse yourself in the scatology and religious nonsense and overall very disturbing graphic style of this particular game. The Alan Wake franchise, 75% off, taking it down to $10, €8.99 and £7.74. What does the franchise contain, you might ask? Well, I can answer that for you. It contains Alan Wake, American Nightmare, and the Collector's Edition extras, which happen to come with a PDF book as well as commentary videos and the soundtrack. Overall, the franchise pack will save you a little bit, not a huge amount. And obviously, you might not necessarily even want the extras, but it's a reasonable amount nonetheless. Now, Alan Wake is certainly not a perfect game. It's a survival horror. It's got some pretty cool elements. It's got some stuff that really isn't all that good. The combat is okay. I'd say it's improved in American Nightmare, honestly. The themes are good if you're into this whole Twin Peaks weirdness. And if you're not, then you're not going to find it all that appealing at all. There's some pretty obnoxious product placement in the game, and some would argue that the backtracking can be quite annoying, and there's kind of illusion of freedom going on with the game, whereby it's more linear than it appears to be. But honestly, what I will say is that it's very atmospheric, and the PC port was nothing short of phenomenal. It took them like 2 years to make it, and they did it themselves. They actually funded it without a publisher, so technically, Alan Wake is actually an indie game. But honestly, they did a stellar job with it. They really did. It's very rare to see an FOV slider in a third-person game, but you do have one. And when it comes down to American Nightmare, well, that's a nice piece of value, honestly. You know, it's a smaller game. It's got a nice horde mode with it, and it's got this kind of Twilight Zone vibe going on. And if you're looking for something cheap and cheerful, which is a little bit survival horror, a little bit mystery, then American Nightmare is a really good way of grabbing it, especially considering it's very, very cheap. But honestly, if you are into survival horror, and you do want something atmospheric, then you probably could do a hell of a lot worse than just picking up the franchise pack. As I said, it's got some faults, but at that price, and with that good a PC port, it's actually worthy of your attention. Terraria, 66% off, taking it down to $3.39, €3.39, and £2. I don't have to explain Terraria to you, do I? Really? I mean, come on, there's been enough on the bloody channel, but essentially Terraria is a 2D Metroidvania game with crafting and construction elements. Anyone that says it's really like Minecraft is not correct, because, as I said, it is more like a 2D combat-orientated Metroidvania with a randomly generated world that rewards exploration and has a very specific tiered progression system involved in it, where you get a certain material and then craft these items, then you go deeper and get this stuff and blah blah blah, and then you can reset it with the hard mode. Now, bear in mind, this game isn't really supported anymore. It's been quite some time since this game got an update, and indeed, it's being ported to consoles with additional content, I believe by a different company entirely, but Terraria is a lot of fun with friends. Not so much fun on your own, really. I feel that you've really got to play it co-op and actually explore the world and see what's going on with it, but it is always a game that I will recommend because it's got a hell of a lot of creativity, variety, and gameplay value in it at a very cheap price. And honestly, when it comes to games which involve a lot of exploration and combat, most of them get the combat system wrong, and Terraria's combat's actually a lot of fun, so you might want to have a look at that. And finally, the Fable franchise, 75% off. So for Fable 3, that takes it down to $12.49, €9.99, and apparently it's not available in certain countries. I believe that might be due to the fact that it uses games for Windows Live. So there are certain Tier 2 European countries that won't actually have this available. Just bear that in mind. And it's also available for £7.49. Now, honestly, the game that I would be looking at in this big selection is Fable: The Lost Chapters, that being the first game. Now, that game was a pretty charming action RPG with entertaining combat, good music, and a selection of interesting characters, as well as a pretty cool storyline. And it's got a lot of interesting side quests. It had some good features. It certainly was nowhere near what was promised, but it was a hell of a lot of fun nonetheless, and it had a reasonable sense of humor for the most part. So, Fable: The Lost Chapters was a good game, right? Fable 3, on the other hand, really wasn't. So, Fable 3 is too short, The PC port's not very good. Co-op has all sorts of problems. If you want to know about that, then just go and watch what the Yogscast did on the game. It was a freaking disaster piece for them. And it's got some really horrible mechanics. It's got unbalanced combat, and it also runs into this huge problem towards the end, essentially. And this is kind of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear this, then tune out for the next minute. Essentially, what you do is you rebel and you become the king, right? And then you get to manage the kingdom, but it's done in a stupid, arbitrary way. As in, you randomly have a bunch of days skipped, so you can't effectively plan your kingdom management in any way. You think, oh, well, it's fine, I've got a number of days before this, and then it suddenly skips 100 days for no reason with no warning. It is unbelievably stupid, not to mention the fact that it has some absolutely ridiculous black and white arbitrary choices. Do you want to build an orphanage or a brothel? Come on, really? It's just absolutely absurd in my opinion. I really don't like Fable 3 at all. While it does have some interesting features for the PC, it's got a little bit extra content, and it's got 3D in a hardcore mode, I don't feel that Fable 3 was a particularly good game. It's a shame we never got Fable 2. That was a bit short, but at least it was pretty good. Fable 3, on the other hand, is just a bloody mess. And if you want a way more in-depth critique of the game, then by all means go and watch the Top 32 Reasons Fable 3 Sucks by Angry Joe. That's got a hell of a lot of reasons as to why this game is worth avoiding. Alright folks, and that wraps me up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox. If I get the opportunity, I will do one on New Year's Day. Just don't necessarily expect it, because, you know, family life is a little bit more important. Thanks a lot, folks, and I will see you next time.